So I recently rewatched the 2014 film Boyhood, and if you don't remember when this movie was coming out, it was a largely talked about movie. This was a film that many people thought maybe was going to win Best Picture in a year that had some real contenders. Birdman, which ultimately won it, Whiplash, which I think all three of those movies were very important for me as someone who had just graduated high school and was just getting into movies. Having kind of those three I think fantastic movies all kind of helped shape how I view just the art form in general. But despite Boyhood at a certain moment being considered the best picture frontrunner, it was not without its critics. So if you have not heard about Boyhood, the general synopsis is it is a film that follows a boy grow into a young man. It takes over 12 years to film, which is kind of the most notable thing about it. The most talked about thing about this movie is just that it took 12 years to make. And I think this gave it some criticism from the people that did not really enjoy this movie. Of it kind of became an easy thing to say, oh, wow, it took 12 years to make. It doesn't make it inherently a good movie, which is true. Just because something was difficult to make does not inherently make the experience you have watching it good. I think Red Letter Media was actually a big part in this movie kind of no longer being a darling on the internet and kind of being a heavily criticized movie on the internet. They went on their YouTube channel, which if you haven't watched Red Letter Media and you've watched me, what are you doing? Check them out. But this was one of their videos I wasn't really a big fan of, partially because they disliked the movie I liked, but that's fine. You know, we can have different opinions. But they were very kind of dismissive, like, oh, but it took 12 years to make, as if that's the only positive that you could have with watching the movie Boyhood. And to be honest, to some degree, I can see why someone would say that. Because if you watch reviews of people that enjoyed the movie, it's kind of impossible to not talk about the period of time that this movie takes place in and how things have shifted throughout the course of the movie, how you're actually watching people age. That is a part of the overall experience, and pretty much everything I love about this movie is somewhat tied in to the fact that you are actually watching people age. So everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but I felt like I want to make a video to explain why someone who loves this movie beyond just it was difficult. And also on a side note, was it actually that difficult to film? Like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there were tougher time constraints of having a bunch of working actors, and for 12 years you have to make sure you can get them all in the same period of time in the same area so that they can film this. This appeared to be filmed in Texas. I'm assuming most of the people don't live in Texas, so there was definitely some logistical constraints there, but also they're working actors. You're getting them a couple weeks of the year for 12 years. It's not the craziest thing in the world, I feel like, but that's totally besides the point. And also, one of the people was literally Richard Linklater's daughter, who was she was the daughter here. So that, the daughter of Patricia Arquette's character in the movies, Sam. So, listen, it was not the hardest thing in the world, maybe, but it was still difficult. There were constraints, and it was still very impressive. So to talk about why I love this movie so much, first I just gotta talk about Richard Linklater for a second. I just feel like he's someone who, when he makes a movie, it just hits for me maybe more than it hits for other people. I'm just a big fan of what he does. I really enjoy the Before trilogy, even like Hitman that came out recently. I feel like I really enjoyed that. I just enjoy all of the things that he does for the most part. So, like, I think part of it is when he writes his dialogues, it just hits for me. Like, I find it fascinating. But when I think about this film and the project as a whole, you can't help but kind of view it as it's almost like how you remember your own childhood, where there are certain big events that you're gonna remember, like if you have a drunk stepdad that's throwing you in a car and racing around and doing all that stuff, but there are also just kind of some things that for whatever reason stick in your brain, like when you asked your dad if elves are real, or maybe you don't remember the graduation itself, but you remember the graduation party, right, in specific moments of that. I think I would be lying if I said that there isn't a part of my enjoyment of this movie that comes from the time period itself that it was created. Because Eller Coltrane, the actor who played Mason, he was born in 1994. I was born in 1995. Like I said, I graduated high school the year this movie came out. So this is very much in my time frame of how I was experiencing life. I played the Wii when that came out. I played, I remember those Apple computers in those things. Like, I have those memories the way that this movie displays them. And I think the film was very smart in how it used a lot of pop culture and technology to kind of let you know what the time period was. It's also part of why I think the movie actually ages well, despite purposely dating itself, because as further you get from those things, the more you remember those things and the more nostalgia you have for those things. But throughout this film, Boyhood, you have the character of Mason, who is kind of aimlessly wandering through life. He doesn't do a lot, right? And that's a criticism by some. That we have a main character who is very rarely moving whatever kind of plot there is forward. There really isn't a plot in this movie, but isn't driving things, is very much taking a back seat. But I think that is an intentional decision by Richard Linklater. I don't think he's unaware of the fact that his main character is is someone just along for the ride, is a passenger in his own movie. Because in life, that's kind of what happens when you're young, right? You're constantly getting all this advice, constantly getting told, here's what you got to do. These are the things you have to do. His dad will give advice, some of it not always good. His mom will give him advice, and some of that not always good. Even like his teacher giving him advice, and some of it is good too. And you're just trying to kind of figure out who you are when you are at that stage of your life. And you see Mason kind of just wander through that stage of his life. I think many of these moments that this film pulls off just would not work without the quote-unquote gimmick, if you want to call it that, of the aging, of taking this over 12 years. Like, I think about the person that there's a point in the movie where Patricia Arquette's character tells a worker, like, hey, you're smart, you should go back to college. Later on in the movie, we find out he actually took that to heart. He did go back to school and has improved his life because of that comment. That's something that would have probably felt really corny if it wasn't due to the aging thing, but the fact that we also see them being years older really helps make you feel like that's something that did actually happen. I also think about like when Mason, more towards the end of the film, he has this girlfriend who he likes, and then it cuts to they're a year older, and you can tell that they don't like each other anymore. That's something that, again, you could have pulled off without having constant aging throughout this movie. That could have been done, but I just feel like it hits harder and makes it feel more natural the way that this film was created. But the real reason I think this movie is just so good is kind of explained in the final moment, where you have Mason talking to a girl he just met, and they are simply talking. They get a conversation about the phrase "seize the moment," and they say, they say "seize the moment," but I think the moment seizes us. Like, it's always right now, and I think that is kind of what this movie is, in a sense. You're sitting there watching this happen, and you're always in the moment that you were watching the movie, and all of a sudden it's over, and you've seen several, over a decade pass you by. You've often heard parents say the expression, they grow up fast, because that can be how it feels. But I also think that it works with the parents themselves. Patricia Arquette's character is, I think, what kind of makes this whole movie work, the glue that holds this all together, because we see her throughout this film try to improve her life and her family's life, right? She is constantly, she goes back to school, she's trying to get a better job, she's trying to find a father that can, or a stepfather that can kind of help out with things, and often failing at doing so, and failing at finding someone who can be a good member of the family. And in her final scene of this movie, she's seeing her son get ready to move out and start college, and how excited he is to start college, and she can't help but start to cry. And part of it is just the natural, hey, I'm now going to be living alone. I've spent the last 18 years of my life raising this kid, and now I have to, my life has changed. But also part of it is seeing him in his excitement for the new possibilities. You even see Patricia Arquette's character, Olivia, in this moment, in this scene, she talks like, maybe I'm going to finally write a book and try and get that published. She's still trying to figure out what she's going to do with her life, essentially, even though a good chunk of it has passed. And there's still plenty left, but you can see her feel the weight of the passage of time. As she says in the movie, I just thought there'd be more, which is, I think, just kind of, in some ways, those are the two lines of the moment is always right now, and I just thought there'd be more of, you can, I think sometimes you get pitched the American dream and all the things that it comes with, but you don't always necessarily get all those boxes, and even if you do, it doesn't necessarily always totally fulfill you. Again, she's totally happy that she had her kids and how that worked out, but she still wishes there was more. And seeing where she's at, you can't help but wonder a little bit of what will it be like for Mason, someone who is now, the actor is now 30, and in the context of the film, someone who will eventually grow up and get older as well as everyone else does. Will the fictional character of Mason end up also having those same feelings of wishing that there was more to life at certain points, or will he be able to accomplish everything he wants to accomplish and have those things satisfy him? But I think the answer is that Mason throughout this movie seems to have the right idea more so than anybody else. It's not about trying to do this and trying to do that. It's about living in the moment and genuinely being able to look at the nature around you and just see how beautiful it is and exist where you are in that specific moment. The moment is always going to be right now until the end of time. My moment is talking into a camera right now. Your moment is listening to me blab on about a movie that I loved watching over 10 years ago and still love watching today. You live in what you're doing right now, and there is, I just think, a beauty in that. There have been many art house films that have told you, like, it's all about what you're doing right in this moment. That's the meaning of life. And there was a point when Mason asked his dad, Ethan Hawke's character, like, what's the meaning of life, essentially? And Ethan Hawke's like, I don't know, like, which is a fine thing to say. But for a film this ambitious, it does have a there. It is trying to tell you about what can happen with life, and whether you're constantly trying to change things or not, it's still going to pass you by. The time is still coming no matter what. And just as much as that can be a terrifying thought, that can be a beautiful thought as well. And again, you couldn't do this if you just filmed this all in, 2 months and changed their hair and changed the actors and stuff. You needed to film it this way, and that's why I think it's such a fantastic movie, and one that if you have not checked out, sorry, I spoiled a lot in the movie, but if you haven't checked it out, I have not spoiled anything. You can still get the exact experience out of this movie with everything that I have said, because it is something that you can talk about all you want, but you really have to experience it to experience it. So, those are my thoughts on Boyhood. Let me know if this is something that you think is interesting, going back and talking about movies that I like. I always like when I watch content creators who are talking about movies, like, it seems like talking about bad movies tend to be what gets clicks, but I always like hearing someone just talk about a movie that they like. So that's what I did here. Maybe I'll have another, something else with this later. Another movie I like that I'll talk about. Let me know if you think that's a good idea. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.